And let the frivolities begin. Welcome to our work of art.
Right.
Left.
Are we going to actually just get on with this fairly quickly?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Hello.
Maybe. Or I might just be annoying.
You definitely will. Hello, Internet. Oh, my voice very well.
Get it together.
Hello, Internet. I'm Firebolt.
And I am the Orbiter.
Okay. And welcome to episode 40. 40 episodes.
Fuck you now.
I'm going to catch up to your age soon.
Breaking Bollocks is going to have a midlife crisis.
Well, hopefully this goes on longer than most.
Hopefully it won't lose its license for a year like I did.
Is that the age when you did?
No, I was a bit younger, I think. Possibly. I don't know. 2011.
I was 7, so it would have been 2011 or 2010.
Yeah, that's another story for another time. But I thought...
It's not a very happy story, is it?
No. I learnt my lesson, though.
Anyway, news. This is a bit of a weird one, because we're recording this a lot earlier than usual, because when we would normally been recording, I will be in Prague.
You actually have arrived Sunday evening? Yeah, because you're leaving on Saturday, aren't you?
I don't know. Yeah, we would have arrived.
Yeah, because you're going to a Rocket Man sing-along screening on Friday evening.
Oh, that's what's happening on Friday? I thought we were leaving on Friday.
No, Saturday afternoon.
Anyway, so we're recording this actually on the Monday, the week before, so we probably haven't got a huge amount of news. But I don't think we discussed this, even if this did happen before the...
Which is one of the reasons why Better Call Paul is late this week. Sorry, it was late last week, but carry on.
I don't think we discussed this before... it might not have happened before the recording of last podcast, so I don't think we discussed it. Trump, just for a change, has been on a racist tirade against 4 congresswomen in the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
He basically said, if you don't like it here, you can go back to where you came from and fix their government. Mm-hmm. To which, 3 of them were actually born in the United States, so a lot of them just said, well, we're fixing it right now, so fuck you.
Yeah.
One of them's a naturalized citizen from Somalia, but it's sort of inconsistent how they make it. It's just sort of, they don't like the changes that they would actually make, which these people are actually proposing real systematic changes to the US, which is needed. And I agree with a lot of the things that they say. But it's just this sort of, like Trump promised change, but he wasn't actually ever going to do it. He was just going to make things more the same, really. Okay. But
so he's still a dick.
Yeah, but it's just sort of an interesting moment, especially because he went on a campaign rally, which for some reason he's still, he's been doing this the entirety of his presidency because he basically is treating it like one big campaign.
Yeah.
The crowd started chanting, "Send her back."
Nice. Not.
Presumably talking about Ilhan Omar, which I believe she is the only Muslim congresswoman to, I think, have ever served. She is the one that's a naturalized immigrant from Somalia. I believe. But basically, I mean, they sort of, I think, are hiding behind this claim that she's anti-Semitic, which she absolutely isn't. She just criticised Israel, which a lot of, especially in American politics.
Well, call me anti-Semitic, but Israel kind of needs some criticism.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
As do America, as do the UK.
There's a lot of open racism against Palestinians from people that support Israel. It's quite disturbing. They'll say, they just want to bomb shit and live in open sewage. It's just really weird. And
who wants to live in open sewage?
Not really anyone, but it's sort of the Israeli government's forcing them into a situation where they kind of do.
Yeah.
Because they've been dickheads, but nobody will fucking listen to that.
So we've got a new Lib Dem leader.
Oh, have we? I didn't really notice. I've not been paying attention to Lib Dems because no one does. I'm really sorry, but...
Joe Swinson.
Oh, I remember hearing something good about them, I think.
Who I think has said as well that it's while Boris Johnson is obviously a fucking disaster of a choice if he gets the position, which we're going to find out tomorrow morning, actually. Voting is now finished.
All right. Well, it's probably
it's looking likely that it'll be him, but she's actually said, well, that's good for the Lib Dems.
Yeah.
Because it gives them a better chance because nobody wants Boris Johnson as PM.
Yeah, nobody among the general population, I think.
Mm.
But
there was somebody had resigned yesterday in case Boris Johnson got in.
Yeah.
It's like,
I can't believe that. And we've just played it right into the hands of fucking incompetent idiots that just seem to have so little morals that they'll be willing to do anything to get into power. That we played it right into the hands of the likes
I hate to tell you this, but it's been in their hands for decades.
Okay, but it's been getting worse.
Yeah.
David Cameron, as much as he was a horrible prime minister and incompetent in quite a few areas, he could at least string a sentence together. It's sort of now what would have been like the most ludicrous situation 10 years ago is now actually our reality.
Do you know what made me laugh the other day? I know it's memes and shit on the internet, and I'm trying to avoid kind of being quite so up to date with the news, like to the amount that I have been, because I feel like I've got a phone addiction. But obviously I'd like to stay a little informed. But there was a meme about scientists in the 1960s basically saying, yeah, look what we've done, everyone, we've landed on the moon. And then there was a flash forward to scientists now going, how many times do we have to tell you the Earth is round? It's like the difference.
I worry. Do you think it's the internet that's done this?
I don't know, but you've already put together your audio clip for it. But there's an After Dark network round table discussion coming up next week where everybody's had to choose their 12 top albums of all time, and I've done a lot of going back and listening to stuff that I haven't listened to for decades. And it's reminded me of a time when you could be disconnected from the world,
Yeah.
When things that finding out the news right as soon as it happened wasn't the be all and end all. And I mean, there are benefits to the connected world that we live in, obviously.
Well, here's the
but
thing.
I think it's difficult to control. If
what was going on right now happened 20 years ago, I believe, particularly with the Russian collusion, it's been called by John Oliver stupid Watergate, because it's got all the implication of Watergate, but it's just everyone in it is incredibly stupid.
Yeah.
So if this had happened 20 years ago, I mean, admittedly, the sort of bot campaigns couldn't have really happened 20 years ago, so that's another point. But
well, see, this is something that really struck me, and I suppose it's digressing, but this is what we do on Breaking Bollocks, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was looking at the different... One of the things that we had to pick for that show that's coming up was also favourite stage musicals, and I was thinking about what to go for, and I'm not going to reveal what it was, but the one that I went for, the theatre that were putting it on at the time... The writer of the musical basically took them to court and sued them for running an inefficient box office, which contributed to the short run that this musical had. And I thought to myself, how can you run that doesn't make sense nowadays. That's really about just having a good website nowadays. But back then, you had two ways of getting tickets for something. Well, three, I suppose, if you count applying by mail. But you could either walk into the box office at the theatre itself, or you could phone up.
Right.
So I suppose if you're not staffing the phone lines properly, and most people can't just walk into the theatre itself to buy a ticket, then that could quite easily have... But I mean, nowadays it just seems ridiculous. People are getting on waiting lists to buy tickets 18 months in advance. It's like...
Yeah, you had to do with Hamilton because it's just that much in demand.
So it's scary when you forget, because it happens, I mean, gradually, but it has actually been quite quick. The amount the world is changing and how we can adjust to that.
I would say, because
I miss being cut off. I miss being away from the world sometimes.
I think it's done more good than bad.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I think we can't just assume that things will naturally get better because.
But I need to get in control
have.
of my consumption, because there are times, numerous times every day that I will pick up my phone and I've got a list of things that I do. And when I run out of those things, I don't know what to do. I've got my phone in my hand and I'm wanting to, I look at my emails, I look at Facebook, I look at Twitter, I look at my bank account, I look at the BBC News website. And all of those things, once I've exhausted them, I'm sat with my phone in my hand. It's like, what do I do now? And it's like, that's not right. That's addiction.
I tend to do that when I've not really got anyone to talk to. I would just, if you have
That's
actually
most of the time for me.
Yeah, I notice you do still look at your phone quite a lot when other people are about. And
yeah, I want to actively change that.
It's just sort of, you shouldn't try and just like actually cut yourself off, because I mean you'll naturally intake news nowadays.
Yeah,
but I think the main thing is also
I want to get in control of it. I think is the thing.
But also sort of being aware of things that the news doesn't report on as well.
And it's a difficult thing with social media when you have actual friends. I mean, like we've had friends on that we've never met in the last episode. And your only route of communication with them is Twitter or Facebook or whatever online. It is a social kind of environment. So I'll find out ways of doing it, because I want people to be able to contact me when there's something to say, because there's business that comes through Messenger and stuff like that. So I'll set up my alerts, but I'll just try not to be picking my phone up through habit when I don't need to.
Okay. Just going back to, I know it's annoying that you have to sort of talk about this stuff, but I think it's important just to quickly stress this on Trump's racist tirade.
Oh, yeah.
Trump is a racist. There is no denying this. If you deny this, you are either an idiot or a racist yourself.
I'm on the Avenue Q. I mean, yeah, he's more of a racist than most people, but I'm on the Avenue Q trip here. Everyone's a little bit racist.
Well, here's the point. Racism isn't a binary thing. It doesn't have to be.
No.
It's sort of at different, and we are going to have an episode on racism at some point. At different points, and depending on your relation to this person, there are different appropriate responses, and you don't have to just say, "Oh, this person is a racist. That's the end of be all," because there are really quite serious racists that there is nothing like you could do to just educate them. They are past the point of no return, like actual white supremacists.
And there are a lot of people who may have some racist tendencies that they're not even aware of. They would prefer not to have.
But I mean, just like, especially with like relatives and friends, a lot of people have racist tendencies. And I think the important thing is, I find it weird, because a lot of people are calling Trump's words racist, but not actually him racist. He is definitely a racist.
Yeah.
When you say so many racist things, and his own policies have been so fucking racist, and everything he's done has been to reinforce systemic racism as well.
There's a very small minority of people who actually not just admit, but I suppose kind of claim to be racist. Because most people who are racist would probably claim that they're not. You get this phrase coming out, "I'm not racist, but," and that's kind of.
It's sort of, there's a certain point where you do it so often that it
becomes the norm.
You are a that is the main defining feature of you. If that's
I think the problem with hearing a president saying things like that is that it's almost an attempt to, and it succeeds in normalising that kind of conversation.
Yeah, because now you've got
among
people
a certain group of people.
That, I mean, it's weird because the way that we look at it has changed so much. That sort of thing would have been, people would have just sort of glazed over 30 years ago. But at least people are actually talking about this now.
Well, that's the thing, though. I mean, when I look back at some of the stuff that they trot out on these nostalgia programs about the 70s and that the TV shows that were openly, blatantly racist, but yes, they were, but they weren't in that way. They weren't nasty about it. They weren't sort of saying, go back where you came from. They were taking the piss out of people, which is what comedy does. I'm not excusing the way they did it, or the reasons that they did it, but it wasn't in that kind of malicious way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely did exist maliciously then, no.
Yeah, definitely. But
I think the thing is, it's sort of, we're at a turning point where, anti-racism has almost won, so the racists are pushing back as hard as they can, because they realise, you might actually live in a world where people are at least close to equal in some countries. I'm not sure how much it is just people are being disingenuous, because I think there's a lot of people that will deliberately ignore facts that they are uncomfortable
with. A lot of the kind of offence brigade kind of issues across the board, racism included. I just wish people. I wish rather than people being called racist or homophobic or whatever the particular issue is, I wish you could just turn around and say you're a dick. And it wasn't kind of calling them out on a specific thing, or
you need to call them out on a specific thing, because we need to have more specific. This is how language works. You can't.
I know, but you're still labelling someone then, and if they don't think they're racist, then they're never going to listen to you.
Well, if they don't think they're a dick, then it's to a point that you're more scared of calling someone a racist or a homophobe. You're more scared of these words than you are of them actually being racist or homophobic. And that's ridiculous, because they're the ones actually being a dickhead.
No, because if I heard somebody behaving like that or talking like that, I wouldn't openly just say to them, "You're racist."
Okay.
I would say, "You seriously, honestly think that saying stuff like that's okay?" And get them to explain to me why they think that's okay.
Yeah, but
calling names doesn't help. Is what I mean.
Yeah, but
people put fences, put shields up then.
Letting that sort of thing be. Well, this is the thing about it being sort of scaled, because there are some things like, say, an elderly relative or
We've had this happen.
Yeah. Say someone that you know fairly well makes a racist comment. No, you might not say, that they're outright racist. It might be a terrible thing that they've said, but there's a way that you can educate them
when
on
that did
wrong.
happen, and I think when the last time that happened quite blatantly was we were in the same conversation. I think my response to it was just kind of open. I don't know what the word is. Being flabbergasted by it, just like kind of, are you seriously saying that? You know how that sounds, surely.
Yeah, but here's the thing: when it's a president, or when it's another politician or someone online, you don't know this person that well, so you don't really have any incentive to just continue that relationship with them.
No, it's a difficult one as well, because it's in a political arena. Whatever you say to someone, whether it's justified or not, whatever you label someone or whatever you accuse someone of, can always be misinterpreted as a political.
The thing with, because this is the sort of thing that I don't get. The people that are always complaining about people being so easily offended, you can get them really easily offended by just telling them the fucking truth. I'm not going to be
I'm with Stephen Fry on that.
Yeah. Here's the thing that I'm more worried. I'm less worried about offending. I don't care if I offend a racist, basically. If I call a racist and they get offended, that's not my issue.
Yeah.
It might take them a few years to realise it, but at least if someone actually fucking says it out loud, then that at least plants something.
They might never realise it, but they're not going to be joining in the society that we.
It says to everyone, this is not okay, this is why. Here's the word that we use to describe these kinds of people.
Yeah.
They can fuck off for all I care. I don't care.
So what's the difference between racism and xenophobia?
Xenophobia is a form of racism based on nationality.
Right. Because I'm presuming with the part of the word that says phobia that it's more based on fear of foreigners, is it, rather than just
I guess, but
a lower opinion of them.
a lot of the time, people have racism. I think includes a lot of time like a phobia of people of different skin colours.
Yeah. Anyway, should we get onto the subject of today's podcast?
Perhaps.
I always think when you get to the 20-minute mark that you should perhaps kind of grab control.
Anyway, that's my bit, because I just don't care if I offend a racist or a homophobe. They can fuck off for all I care. I'm going to call them out for what they are.
No, I don't. I suppose I just get fed up with hearing about Trump. But then
there's a lot.
That's kind of what he intends, isn't it?
Even with this centre-back chant, people were willing to say, oh, his words were racist, and this was a terrible moment, but they still won't call him a racist because they're worried that'll hurt the argument. It's just sort of like you're beyond the point of no return at this point. So
I suppose it's as long as you can give somebody an opportunity to become not a racist, because I think when people label something, it tends to have the flavour of something being permanent. That being a racist is an inherent characteristic of that person that can't change.
When Liam Neeson, he said. He admitted in an interview that he had racist.
I thought
he wanted to kill a black person.
Yeah,
when he was younger.
But I mean,
So I would say that he's now probably not a racist, but because he's improved so much.
You see, if one of us said something like that, it wouldn't have that big an impact. But because he's famous, that it must be so difficult. You have to really kind of be aware of how stuff that you can say can be twisted or misinterpreted.
And I think it was important that there was some people pretty shocked by this, but it's still sort of, well, that's good. Someone actually admitted it for once.
Yeah, I think it's also important. There were a lot of people that stood up and said, well, no, good on him. I mean, he wasn't saying that he would do that now.
It's sort of, it's better than people have been in the past.
I mean, apart from anything else,
you should never have to admit that.
He was talking about, he was in Northern Ireland, wasn't he?
Yeah.
At the time. It's like, is anyone seriously going to question why somebody might be overwhelmed with feelings of hate and anger in that environment?
Yeah. Northern Ireland is like our Texas.
The fact that he's actually come through it and come out the other side, a lot of people haven't, and our government could be pushing them back into that era. Anyway, let's get onto the podcast.
Right, yeah.
Before it turns into a...
We'll have an episode on this subject anyway, but I just think it's more important to actually call people out than just tiptoe around labels.
Before we proceed into the subject, I just wanted to... I think this is an evolving work of art, as always, and I just thought I kind of quite like the way things have worked out tonight, because I did put a shout out to see if anyone could take part in the discussion via Skype like they did last time. And I didn't know whether or not we want the format to kind of go down that route officially, if you like, or if we're better off keeping it as just us two or just us three when Star Stuff's here. But I think the core of just us two talking about things does feel really natural and the core of our output, if you like. It is nice to have guests on, and it is good. Great, it's great input.
You do feel a bit more restricted, though, I think.
Especially, I felt a bit... don't take this the wrong way, Craig and Simon. It was great having you on, and we will have you on again if you're willing to.
We can add Craig on, have we?
Not Craig, sorry. Nick. Sorry. I'm halfway into my beer. But especially drinking beer, I felt like we were being watched. So it's a different technique. I feel like I can be more myself and more relaxed when there's not a face staring at me.
It's fine. I think we'll just sort of
but I like
play it by ear.
Yeah, I like the option of having people on, and I like the idea of just putting a shout out on the day, and then if people take it up, they do, and if they don't, we can just have our one-on-one like it always was.
It gives a bit more variety to the sort of...
It keeps us on our toes as well.
Yeah. It means that we don't really know who's coming on.
There seems to be plenty of people interested. There's It Is After Dark being recorded tonight. Simon's off playing darts. There's some lucky bastards from The Customer Is Always Weird down at the Halloween Horror Nights event. So we're going to talk about art.
Yes.
By ourselves.
Woof.
I was thinking...
Let's just say woof. That's weird.
So art, I was thinking, because we're drinking while we podcast, and podcasting is essentially a work of art. It's a form of expressing yourself.
You're pushing it a bit, but I guess, yeah.
Does that mean that we are literally piss artists?
We're pissed artists in more ways than one.
So yeah, art. This could be quite a big subject, actually, once I start thinking about it.
It could be. It's just sort of finding where to begin.
Can I maybe bring in my big book?
Oh, you're playing that straight away?
I don't know. I wanted to... Well, the thing was, we did the... for the Everybody's Got One podcast, we did our top 5 books thing, didn't we?
Right.
And one of my books, one of my top 5 books actually, was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. And I mentioned the first sentence of it, and it's from the preface, which is literally 1 page long, and I wondered whether or not you would indulge me and let me read it.
I suppose I have to.
So,
get your audiobook voice ready.
Yeah. This is my favourite book of all time, and it's essentially, I said on that podcast that it was, the reason is that the book is essentially about art. The story, have you seen the film, Picture of Dorian Gray?
No.
It's very good. But anyway, the artist is the creator of beautiful things. To reveal art and conceal the artist is art's aim. The critic is he who can translate into another manner or a new material his impression of beautiful things. The highest, as the lowest, form of criticism is a mode of autobiography. I'm going to stop just and before I carry on, but every sentence in this, the reason that I put this top of my list was because every sentence in this preface I can actually sit and think about for a good few minutes and actually kind of blow my mind over. So I'm not kind of... you won't be able to do that if I'm reading it out this quick, but I will anyway. Those who find ugly meanings in beautiful things are corrupt without being charming. This is a fault. Those who find beautiful meanings in beautiful things are the cultivated. For these there is hope. They are the elect to whom beautiful things mean only beauty. There is no such thing as a moral or an immoral book. Books are well written or badly written. That is all. The 19th century dislike of realism is the rage of Caliban seeing his own face in a glass. Glass being a mirror, I presume. But do you know who Caliban was?
No. I can look it up if you want.
Yeah, I did have to look that up when we did that. I think he was basically a...
fictional character from Shakespeare, son of the witch Sycorax. I'm guessing that plays some metaphorical significance to do with them looking in a mirror.
Yeah, I think he's... What is it when you're obsessed with your own kind of image, if you like?
Vanity.
Yeah, it's not nihilism. What is it? It's something else.
Narcissism.
Yeah, I think he's basically a narcissist. Caliban is a necessary idea. He's always looking for someone to word him into being.
Half human, half monster.
Okay, so the 19th century dislike of realism is the rage of Caliban seeing his own face in a glass. So basically he's looking at art. Art is the mirror. And when he looks at art, if he's looking at a work of realism, he's basically seeing things as they are.
Right.
So it's like looking in the mirror and seeing your reflection as it is. The 19th century dislike of romanticism is the rage of Caliban not seeing his own face in a glass. So the idea behind that being that romantic art is something which shows you, don't know, romanticism. It's like, I suppose it's like...
seeing something more.
Yeah, making something more out of...
Okay, right, so the thing here is Caliban attempted to rape Miranda. Caliban confirms this gleefully, saying that if he had not been stopped, he would have peopled the island with a race of Calibans.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's like the pinnacle of narcissism then. He is basically...
wanting to make lots of himself.
He is basically narcissism incarnate.
Yeah. So the moral life of man forms part of the subject matter of the artist, but the morality of art consists in the perfect use of an imperfect medium. No artist desires to prove anything. Even things that are true can be proved. No artist has ethical sympathies. An ethical sympathy in an artist is an unpardonable mannerism of style. I ought to say Oscar Wilde's a bit controversial to some people. Some people think he was a bit... because he was very privileged, but at the same time he did spend a lot of his life in jail. There's a huge amount of letters that he wrote from jail for being homosexual.
Right.
But he was quite upper class, I think. He was quite privileged. So no artist is ever morbid. The artist can express everything. Thought and language are to the artist instruments of an art. Vice and virtue are to the artists materials for an art. Now that I find really interesting, and that's like the main subject of this book, because the main character, I would definitely recommend reading this book, and there will be a certain amount of spoilers in what I'm going to say, but basically his best friend is a painter, an artist, and he paints a portrait of Dorian Gray. And what happens is, I won't tell you what happens at the end because that would be the ultimate spoiler, but what happens is this portrait is beautiful when it's painted. It's an exact representation of him. But what happens is, I think the symbolism is that the portrait captures his soul, if you like, his inner beauty. And this Dorian Gray is actually quite a wild character, if you like. He's not a nice guy. Right. So basically, as he hurts people and as he goes around being a bit of a shit, he notices blemishes starting to appear on this portrait. So as he sees this happening, he decides that he's going to hide it away because he doesn't want anyone to see, because he stays forever young, if you like. It doesn't matter what he does or how many people he hurts, he always stays youthful looking and handsome and beautiful on the outside, but his portrait takes all the scars, if you like. And so by the end of the book, he hides this away in this loft, this portrait, and by the end of the book it's like this ugly, disfigured thing. But I'm not going to tell you what happens at the very end. So it says, from the point of view of form, the type of all the arts is the art of the musician. From the point of view of feeling, the actor's craft is the type. Now this is a bit I really like. All art is at once surface and symbol. Those who go beneath the surface do so at their peril. Those who read the symbol do so at their peril. It is the spectator and not life that art really mirrors. Diversity of opinion about a work of art shows that the work is new, complex, and vital. I've had this conversation online about The Lion King.
Right.
That there's so much disagreement about whether or not it's awful or it's really good, that the fact is people are talking about it. And that is, to me, that's art, making people actually discuss.
Just on that, interesting. This is kind of unrelated to art, I suppose, but I watched a video recently. Apparently, this is based on data from OkCupid. They did like a survey where people rated women. It's very objectifying, but the author acknowledges this.
Yeah.
And also it tries to see how many messages these people get on average.
Right.
And actually, the more polarizing a person is in terms of attractiveness, actually means that they get way more messages than someone that's considered overall more attractive.
Right. Okay.
It's interesting as well because it sort of shows a scale of emo as well.
Well, that perfectly fits in with the next, but there's only a couple of three sentences left. But when critics disagree, the artist is in accord with himself. We can forgive a man for making a useful thing as long as he does not admire it. The only excuse for making a useless thing is that one admires it intensely. All art is quite useless.
That's an interesting point as well. Because and this is like one of the most extreme things, because it's sort of placing humanity in quite a weird place, where you have to basically explain the purpose of humanity. And I have a friend who has, in the past, tried to sort of justify a system in which people would be killed, basically, if they didn't reach a certain amount of productivity.
Right.
Which prompts a very strong reaction when initially someone that you sort of consider a friend posits this idea. But you in the end sort of try and say, well, you're sort of describing a system that would be run by robots.
You've got to define productivity as well, because you've got to talk about what is useful. Yeah,
well, that's the thing. What's the point of society if all you're producing is paper clips? Because if you programmed a computer to super intelligent AI to make paper clips, it would kill all of humanity and maximize production of paper clips.
Right.
But the thing is, humans aren't very efficient, but there's something special there. The only way that you can actually get a computer to create art is if you specifically program it with information already in there.
Right. There are increasingly programs that you can write hit songs with.
Yeah, but it will only work on the data that it already has. And if you were asking it to maximize the efficiency of producing those things, there would be something special there lost.
Yeah.
And that's what art is.
I would very much like, because something I like looking at language, and that something's cropped up there where, because I was thinking like the aspect of that which is artificial intelligence, if you like, suggests that it's not just about the information that you input into the program, if you like, but if an artificial intelligence is able to learn for itself from pre-existing works of art, what does the art bit at the beginning of artificial mean? Because official is part of a word, and arty is perhaps the prefix, because you can have like superficial.
Right.
I don't know if that's any. So what does artificial?
The etymology. Okay. Comes from
articulum.
Yeah, but one sec. Handcraft. So presumably like made by someone. So
which part of that is hand?
I'm guessing.
Or is it handicraft, not handcraft? Handicraft.
I'm guessing its official would be craft.
Right. Okay.
Because it's sort of superficial, super crafted, so that it's sort of fake.
That leads me to believe that art then was maybe originally used for things that are done by hand.
Yeah.
But it has become more synonymous with a wider kind of, you can have performing arts, and this was something else I wanted to address actually. Have you ever heard of something which Richard Wagner was very much into when he was writing the Ring Cycle and stuff like that, of the idea of total art?
No.
That needs to be looked up too then. The Ring Cycle, I think, was his kind of magnum opus, if you like. Yeah. But his idea was that to incorporate all the art forms into a single work, if you like.
Gesamtkunstwerk. I know this for a very weird reason.
What's that?
I have to recommend this person, Brian David Gilbert. Very weird person, but they make fantastic stuff. They work for Polygon, which is like a games journalism website, but they also have a YouTube channel in which he makes videos basically doing incredibly pointless stuff, but really nerdy stuff, like reading all the books in Skyrim and criticizing them.
Right.
Or making a 2-axis chart of who's the best cuddler in Mortal Kombat.
Right, okay.
As well as recently making all the recipes in Breath of the Wild.
See, this immediately brings to mind, because you mentioned computer games, the first thing I thought was...
Ooh, I'll get on to that.
Total art must become... I mean, back in Wagner's time, when he first wrote about it,
but he
was talking about the art forms that were available to him at the time, but there is always new art being developed.
He also... he wanted to make a perfect Pokemon rap. Basically, he was doing, I think, it was at some conference.
I was thinking about fajita raps then, but carry on.
There's a there's a Pokemon.
Nearly derailed you then.
There's a Pokemon song in which it only mentions some of the Pokemon.
Right.
So he was basically going to say, oh, I want to make the perfect Pokemon rap with all of them in it, but there's some Pokemon that are like celestials, so he said, oh, they could only be made through interpretive dance.
Okay.
But he said that he only had a certain amount of time, so he had to say them quite quickly. So he had to sort of very quickly do proper rap, sort of edgy rap, in which each line could be rhymed with something anti-drug.
Yeah.
But also did interpretive. He basically said that it would have to last 4 hours to do it properly, but in his contract for the conference, the guards there could use any means necessary to neutralize him if he didn't fulfill his contract, which means they said, I will die if I don't actually do this rap properly, and I don't have 4 hours to do this.
Where do the limits come in? Are there any limits to art? Because, I mean, do you remember last year on the news that Banksy work that got sold for God knows how much it sold for, and then like immediately, as soon as the hammer came down, it shredded itself in the frame.
But only half shredded, which actually made it like
more
3
valuable.
times more valuable.
Yeah, because it didn't unique. Actually work. Yeah.
It makes it different from all the other works.
And not only that, but it made it different from how it was intended to be in the first place.
And this is why something like a blank canvas being sold for millions, or 4 minutes 33 can work.
Do you know that? I mean, that really brings up the idea of what a lot of creative artists, I think, I've heard say is that once they work. I mean, obviously, I'm more familiar with musicians, but when they write a piece of music or a song, or when a painter does a painting, they work on it, and then when they finish it, it's almost like giving birth. They have to let it go. They have to send it out into the world, and then it takes on a life of its own.
I don't like finishing things, to be honest, because I do like to write sometimes in my spare time when I'm not being.
We had this come up in our college course when I was doing sound production, which was one of the things that is actually sometimes seen as a drawback of the amazing technology that we've got available in the recording studio nowadays, is that you can save multiple versions of everything that you do at any point during the recording process, and then you can go back and pull it apart and edit it and do whatever you like with it. But back in the analog days, when you had a tape machine in a studio, you had to commit. There were certain points at which you had to draw a line, and you could not go back. You couldn't reverse engineer any of what you'd done. You couldn't save a version and then move on. I mean, one brilliant example of it is Bohemian Rhapsody. They've done a surround sound version of that, which I've got, but they couldn't separate out every individual voice part in the middle section, because there was a point in which they ran out of channels in the studio, so they had to bounce them down. They had to bounce, say, 8 voice parts down onto one track. So they can't after that point, they can't then separate them out and remix them. So there is that finality that we seem to have more difficulty with nowadays. I mean, some of our earlier stuff, we run out of space on hard drives, and that we can't go back and make any changes to some of our earlier episodes because we don't have the original footage anymore. So the idea, I think, of being able to just not finish something, but being able to say, right, that's it. This is, or setting deadlines for yourself, or some way of nowadays being able to complete something is kind of a move on. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think, and this is me slightly psychoanalyzing myself here. I have 2 books that I'm writing at the moment, which is ridiculous for someone of my age, but shut up. They have a premise too big that I would ever be able to reasonably finish it. I'm probably never going to finish these 2 books, because each of them probably requires at least 100 chapters.
Right.
And it's this sort of... It might be my sort of way of keeping it so that I don't actually have to finish it and then realise... Because it would be likely, if I was going to write a book, that at least the first one wouldn't really get much attention.
But that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, as I get older, I come to the realisation that at the end of the day, and that's a really difficult concept to let go of, is whether or not it's for anyone else.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's sort of, what's the point of putting all this effort into something if, it's sort of, whilst it was worth the fun then, it's sort of, it needs to be worth more than just my enjoyment. Because if it was just my enjoyment I was looking for, I could read a book. But to write a book,
I suppose it's that ultimate sacrifice, isn't it? That you when you're in the act of creation, you're doing it for yourself, because it's not finished. You're not going to. Most people won't want to show an incomplete product. But then once it's finished, you have to then let go of it. You have to then stop creating that particular thing, and share it. Whether that's, some people deliberately keep things to themselves and they're only discovered posthumously. But at the point at which you let go, you've got to be prepared to accept that nobody else might like it.
And I suppose with a sort of scale, there's a sort of element of, well, even if it's not that well written, because I'm going to assume that my writing skill will increase generally if I just keep at it. So some of the earlier parts of the book I would definitely have to go back to just make them actually bearable to myself.
Yeah. So, I mean, in essence, the act of practicing and honing your craft is almost like you're painting on your own life canvas, really. And that's something that never has to finish.
I guess at that point...
Until you die. And then you as a work of art cease to exist.
That's depressing. An artist is never supposed to be morbid, apparently.
I'm not being morbid. I love tragedies.
I guess.
Being the hero of a tragedy is my... Well, we all are, aren't we? We're all destined to die. We're all the stars of our own movies, of our own lives.
Yeah, but some of them are a bit shit. Well, I guess you're the hero of some tragedies. Read into that what you will.
Well, I'm just trying to think of the different people that I've interacted with in my life, and for some people I will represent a particular kind of character in their story,
right?
Which is very different to the character that I would be in somebody else's story.
I would hope so.
Yeah. Once you start thinking about that, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Oh, I just thought about it even more. That's a dangerous thing. But no, I mean, I guess to some people, even if you are being a bit of a shit, and this is the sort of thing, I think I mentioned it in our reality one, I've relatively recently discovered the meaning of life, not to brag.
42.
What?
42.
No, that's the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Oh, right, okay.
It's
Oh,
sort
Monty
of
Python film, you mean?
no. You have an effect on
You
some.
don't discover the meaning of life.
Well, it just sort of. I had a sort of epiphany of what the meaning of life is to me. It's not the meaning of life, but it's a meaning of life.
What do you define as an epiphany? What is an epiphany?
I think it's defined as a sudden realization.
Right. Okay.
It was sort of something that I'd vaguely understood before, but it's sort of internalizing that.
Right.
It's sort of to teach and learn.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
To learn to become as enlightened as I possibly
See,
can.
I'm not sure how comfortable I am with the idea of realizing or almost uncovering some kind of truth like that. To me, I think you kind of define it for yourself, don't you?
But that's the point. This is the point where I feel like I've internalized at least a particularly important meaning for me in life.
So maybe in that sense, the word realize is actually really accurate because you've made that internal thing
I've
real
made it
now.
my reality.
Yeah.
This is sort of off the topic of art, but we do this all the time.
But that's well. Speaking of that, see, Craig thinks of podcasts as works of art.
Yeah, I
And
guess.
It's that idea of expressing yourself. There's lots of different kinds of podcasts.
But the thing is,
Some of them are just news,
podcasts
aren't they?
might be the equivalent of piss art. And
Well,
some might actually be good.
We did mention actually about at the end of the last episode that there is that idea of literally, you could shit on a canvas and call it art, and
I think people have.
yeah. But if podcasts are works of art, there is a recent podcast where somebody did actually record themselves taking a shit. So, on the canvas of the podcast world,
It's capturing the audio, and that's what a podcast essentially is.
yeah.
I mean, in our form, we've got a camera, but the main bit is the audio, isn't it?
It's a weird one, isn't it? 'Cause it's immortalizing.
Because if you shit on a canvas, you don't actually hear the audio of the person shitting. I guess the gesamtkunstwerk of shitting on a canvas would be audio, video, and the finished product.
Well, you'd have to do a virtual reality filming of it with smell-o-vision.
You would have to be the one taking the shit.
You'd have to be the
virtual
canvas.
Oh, you would be the canvas. You can see the
Paint me with you.
slow motion particles of shit spreading on your face.
So, do you think Two Girls, One Cup is a work of art?
Oh, that's such a... Oh, I'm not genuinely...
Because I was going to...
But I mean, just sort of like...
I mean, that's an extreme version, but I was actually going to bring up the subject of porn.
Yeah, well, like modelling and stuff. Because there are... like naked portraits that they tend to sort of do silhouettes more often, but they are done naked quite
There's
often.
a lot of overtly naked art.
Oh yeah,
from a long time ago.
but I mean like taking an actual photo where it's bare rather than having someone capture it slightly more abstractly with a different material.
But it's weird because if you see a photograph of a naked woman now, it would probably be less likely. I mean, it depends on how tastefully it's lit and all that sort of stuff. But it would be less likely to be. It would be more likely to be accused of being pornographic now than, say, something like a nude sculpture from 300 years ago.
The point of like defining art, I suppose, is that. Well, I suppose it's all in the eye of the beholder. Like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Really, it's only art if you consider it to be art.
So does that not, in essence,
all subjective.
that kind of upholds that definition of the critic? If the critics are in disagreement, then the artist is in accord with himself. So a creator of pornography must be very happy with their work because, because people disagree about whether or not it's art.
No, I think most
or even
people,
legal in some cases.
No, I mean I think most people agree that pornography isn't art to them.
But then
There are cases of nudity that are considered art.
the word porn is used to label most often used to label sexual art.
Well, no, because it's intention. Its intention counts for a lot, because generally pornography's intention is to arouse somebody rather than enable
I've heard
artistic appreciation.
I've heard some films being labelled as torture porn or gun porn. So where's the line drawn there? Because I mean, you know, a horror film that has a lot of gore in it and suffering gore, if you like, could be something like Saw, that series of films, or the Hostel films. They're labelled as torture porn. Are they works of art? And why is the label of torture porn? What's
Here's
the porn
the thing
part
about
of
it
that?
being subjective. It means basically if enough people consider it to be art, or if enough important people consider it to be art, which I don't think enough important people consider porn that call itself porn to be art.
Sorry, say that again. What you said? You don't think
basically because not enough important people consider porn to actually be art. So
I thought that's what you said.
basically, the general consensus is porn is an art, and that's decided by the beholders.
But in a way, I kind of regard.
Whilst the sort of beauty is captured there, it's not really regarded as art in general society. So,
But what is art for? It's to stimulate the senses, isn't it?
I suppose, but
It's about whether or not the stimulation is acceptable
right.
to society. And is not great art that which challenges that which is acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, really, I think the important thing is that the artist calls it art. Because a lot of people would see, with a lot of things, whoever made something to be the ultimate arbiter of what it means. Because, that's there you understand
There's
what
absolutely-
influenced it.
There's absolutely no reason to assume that art has to be legal either. Like you say.
Many works of art haven't been legal. There's been books
I mean,
banned.
I'm particularly thinking actually about, the thing that first sprang into my mind then was graffiti. There's some amazing works of art on the walls around Aberdeen.
But here's the thing.
Which are, go on.
Banksy considers themselves an artist, and general society calls Banksy an artist, even though they are a street artist. But someone, and I particularly find it with just like in marker pen, just like writing a swear word, that person writing that probably doesn't consider that art.
Right.
Whilst it's them expressing themselves, I suppose. General society also doesn't consider that art. So generally,
So it's the intention.
Yeah, intention, but also interpretation.
Of interpretation by...
The interpretation of the beholder.
Right, okay, so something can be art and not art, depending on who you ask.
But I think there's some posters going about that said obey. That's, I think, generally considered art because it's making a statement, and the intention was to make a statement.
Yeah, right.
And whilst saying fuck the police is a statement, a lot of people wouldn't consider it to be an artistic one. So it's generally not considered an artistic one.
So in some ways, it's almost like the...
Here's the thing. Art is defined by just people.
Yeah. Some people might consider simply living as being the creation of a piece of art, a work of art.
Yeah, and...
My life is the canvas.
Well, there's the thing about, like, reality TV.
Yeah.
Capturing someone's life. Or even, particularly, like, with David Attenborough's documentaries, filming life, not of humans necessarily, but of a lizard. That lizard story has actually made people cry because he's ascribed an intention to it.
A lot of people at the moment, and sometimes this is something that's performed for a specific kind of effect, if you like. But live streaming, there are a lot of people who simply put a camera on in their home while they're doing. I looked into this. This is what kind of got us into YouTubing, actually, because I felt I got interested in what live streaming was all about, and I was looking at stuff on Periscope at first, and then now. But there's lots of people that are trying to entertain, maybe doing the kind of thing that we're doing now, but live, almost as sort of live TV presenters, if you like. But there's also lots of other people who are just putting a camera on, sometimes talking to it, sometimes just getting on with their life and just basically having people watch. But, there's whole groups of people that just have a camera on, watching them, streaming them while they're asleep.
Yeah, I'd find that pretty weird. But the thing with, considering that art, I think it's the intention there.
Yeah.
It's really sort of the intention of the artist, but also the beholders are.
Do you think something can be unintentional art?
Yeah, I suppose.
I mean, your thing about the Obey poster, about that being a work of art because it's a statement. Can you unintentionally be making a statement about society by filming yourself sleeping and letting people watch it? That really is a comment on what we've come to as a society. That,
well, there's the point. A lot of people, especially when the artist is dead. So, like with Oscar Wilde, Oscar Wilde is dead. So you could ascribe new meanings to that without actually asking Oscar Wilde, because he never had the chance to make a statement on it.
Well, that's one of the things I know. A lot of songwriters refuse to actually say what their songs are about. Because they want interpretation to happen. They want people to bring their own meaning to it. They want everybody's interpretation to be different, to give their art its own life, if you like.
But I definitely think it is basically art is defined by where you draw the line. If you draw the line with any expression of someone, then
it's beautiful, though. I mean,
art is everywhere. It's in everything.
I think this is why I have a big problem with. I mean, it's good to have people make be critics and have reviews of things.
This beer can, you can't see this,
but
if you're just listening, I've had dear listeners.
Interpretation.
This beer can is a creation. Someone created this.
Yeah, well, the design on it.
It might be a machine, actually.
But the design on it is a work of art that somebody created.
But, really, most people would just throw this in the bin.
And then there's a fine line sometimes, the difference between art and craft. I mean, you might say that somebody's crafted that design for a purpose.
But then there's another point of that, like stimulating the senses. What was actually in the beer can? Beer. Someone, probably a human, actually made that. Probably a machine made the can. So the sort of gesamtkunstwerk, the true gesamtkunstwerk, would involve taste, smell, sight, presumably also in touch, interaction.
What about the person who designed the machine that makes that can?
That's another point. I think well, that's where we get into the intent, because the person that designed, for example, with more traditional art, the person that designed a machine that makes a piece of music, would you say that person actually created the music that created?
Well, you mean like Stradivarius, who built violins?
I suppose that. But I'm meaning more
the people
like
who write
AI.
The software, Sibelius.
Yeah. Well, I'm meaning
for notation.
More specifically,
enablers,
like people that create AI that make new pieces of music, rather than there's another artist.
You could argue that
tool.
the people who are using that AI software are the artist, really, because they're giving the instructions, they're giving the input, they're giving.
But that's the thing; their intent isn't as directly translated. So that's the thing. The machine actually gives the input.
At that point, it's almost scientific experimentation, isn't it? Seeing what the machine is going to come out with.
Yeah.
Given certain
But I think this is the thing about sort of making stories and interpreting as well as sort of its own form of art, because with the way that the planets work, you can make your own stories like Hulse did by giving them sort of personalities and ascribing music to it.
So
also several stories have come of the names that they have as well.
I mean, to a certain extent, you know, I when I'm performing, I program stuff, and I go out and I might play the same piece of music lots of different times, but each performance is going to be different, and it is almost experimentation. You're putting the ingredients in, and you're seeing what you get back. So that, in that sense,
but here's the thing:
is science art?
Yeah, it's an art. And that's where we get into the other meaning of sort of skills are considered art, like martial arts. But I think it's sort of, like I was saying about the subjectivism, it's only really considered art when enough people consider it art.
But see, the thing is, given the right approach to it, I could interpret, I could see anything. I could see the art in anything.
Yeah, but that's the thing. In your everyday life, you probably, I mean, some people might, but you probably won't appreciate the fine details of everything. You'll take every now and then you'll take a moment to pause and think, wow.
To take an example,
most of this was made by a human.
To take a specific, possibly controversial example of The Lion King, it's a work of art, and it's based on another work of art,
which is actually a term based on another piece of art, Hamlet.
But what I was saying about critics, I can't. The difficulty with me is that everything that a work of art is about is determined not only by the creators but by the observers.
Yeah.
Because I've found the same film, the same piece of music, the same anything, any work of art that I can enjoy it immensely one day, but find it boring on another day. And depending on entirely who I'm with, what mood I'm in, whether I'm tired, hungry, you know, what's happening in my life, and everybody who comes to witness a work of art like that brings with them a unique perspective of their life. So not only if I write a song, if I write a piece of music, not only am I putting me into that, but as soon as I let go of it, everybody who hears it is going to bring their whole life to that piece of art and experience it from
that's the thing, sort of
a unique perspective.
Especially here's the thing about viewing like a film for a second time. You've said before, or especially Breaking Bad, because you're
it's a totally different experience, that.
Yeah, because you've experienced it the first time, you take in new information that allows you to experience it in a different way.
One thing I'm finding quite a lot at the moment is that I'm listening to a lot of music I've never listened to before.
And this sort of ties into what I was saying by my meaning of life. You sort of bring your experiences along to what a new experience is trying to teach you.
Do you think cooking is art?
Yeah, it can be, sure. Especially like what Heston Bloom.
I think it goes a little bit too far though when you get this cordon bleu stuff and they bring out a plate and it's got like a little tiny piece of cheesecake on it and it's got lovely, like, intricate drawings in chocolate syrup around it and stuff like that on the plate, and it's like, just give us a fucking slab of cheesecake.
Well, that's the thing. You might not be in the mood for that sort of experience, sort of thing, if you just are actually hungry.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing that you would eat if you aren't actually hungry, and you want the artistic experience of taste.
So art is basically what you say it is.
Well, yeah, kind of. But going back to my meaning of life thing, because you cut me off. It's sort of bringing your experiences to a new experience and trying to. And I think it vaguely mentioned this somewhere in this Wikipedia page for
Pardon me?
gesamtkunstwerk about Hegel.
Gesamt what?
Gesamtkunstwerk.
Say that slowly.
Gesamtkunstwerk.
Right, okay.
It's actually German. Interestingly, if you want to go into the etymology of this, Gesamtschule, which is basically secondary school, I'm guessing that means whole or total. So that's like total school, because in Germany they have different schools for different levels, but Gesamtschule, like we have it in the UK, secondary school is just for all levels of ability. So I'm guessing that's why they use that. Kunst is art, and Werk is presumably like Kunstwerk would be art.
Yeah.
But anyway, sort of, now I've derailed myself. Hegel, yeah. Recently, not that recently, in a book about Marxism, actually, because Hegel had the Hegelian dialectic, which is...
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I'm bringing a lot of big words in.
He is. He definitely is.
He introduced this idea of synthesis, of thesis, antithesis, and
I thought you were going to say feces then. Sorry.
So that's sort of the ideas that you already have, so your experiences, antithesis, this new experience. So art would be an antithesis. It might challenge the thesis that you already have.
Yeah.
But the synthesis is what you get out of it at the end. And I suppose what I mean by the meaning of life is to get... And I know that I don't think anyone can ever achieve perfect enlightenment, because no one can know everything. But the idea is to get the best you, basically.
Do you know? Yeah. Do you know? One of the most useful things I think art is good for is catharsis.
Explain.
I'm not sure I can.
You're being too pretentious for your own good.
If you can imagine, you've been through a lot of difficulty and struggles, and you kind of internalize it because life doesn't let you deal with everything as it happens.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of internal kind of angst and stuff that you've not dealt with. You might then go and see a particularly moving film that has a character that you sympathise with. In my case, I would bring up a particular example of this, would be I really enjoyed, and people who have seen any of my Facebook stuff might know this, the film Rocket Man. I know other people who don't regard it as highly as I do, but one of the main reasons for that is that even though I don't think of Elton John as a character, as a particularly likable character, I understand and empathise and sympathise with his journey because there are similarities with some things that happened to me. You
being a musician, and you have discussed in the past on the podcast about having issues with drug abuse.
Yeah.
Those are main themes of the music.
But, his childhood being particularly, devoid of kind of physical displays of love,
and the fact that you went to the same music school.
Well, that had a massive effect on me. That room that he takes that piano lesson in when he goes to the academy was where I took my entrance exam, and that building, that whole place, is very daunting. That I had a great time when I went to music college, but I suppose what it brought home to me was that really it's not about. See, I always saw myself as a bit of a failure because I didn't finish my course there, and I ended up driving taxis for 10 years. But it took a long time before I realised that actually being a success, in inverted commas, isn't always about what you think it's going to be about. I had a friend who got into West End pit orchestra work and has played in symphony orchestras and has been anything but happy. And you look at someone like Elton John, you could say he's been one of the most incredibly successful musicians over the last few decades that's walked the planet.
Yeah.
But you couldn't in any sense say that he's been, I mean, he's happy now, but he's paid for it.
He had to realise, he had to actually consider his life. And I think this is the important thing about life in general is never think that you know everything. Always have the humility to believe that new experiences can open your eyes to something entirely new that you never, and can make you so much more of a better person.
And I suppose what I meant when I'm talking about catharsis is that there are certain points in that film where I got really emotional. And there'll be the same thing will happen with lots of other people. You know, the same thing happened with when I was reading Winnie the Pooh at the end of that, and at the end of Toy Story 3, you know, that whole growing up thing.
Is
that you get a flood of emotion comes out, which is kind of stuff from your own personal experience. It's not brought about by the artwork.
Was that from being a parent more, or from actually growing up yourself?
From growing up yourself.
Right.
But, well, both, because it's kind of...
there is sort of a sadness of sort of, I can't really enjoy this anymore with the wonder of a child.
It's the two sides of a divide as well, because I read that to you guys as children, and I was reading it to you as an adult, and I knew in some ways that I was almost... It sounds completely wrong, I don't mean it to sound like this, but it was like I was taking a part of your innocence away by introducing you to the concept of loss.
Yeah.
You know, that whole kind of idea of, you know, there are things you are enjoying now as a child that you will leave behind.
But here's the thing. When you leave them behind, you don't leave them behind entirely, because you take...
They're still there.
If you do... And this is why you have to consider it, rather than just going through life and just dealing with everything as it comes to you. You do have to think about what you're doing right now and what you've done in the past. Understand that what you've done in the past you can't change, but understand how you can improve it for the future. And I think what art sort of does is it tells us someone else's experience, or at least we can interpret it and apply it to our own life. So particularly with
what do you do if
Rocket Man? That's a very unusual experience, going right to the top. But and whilst the filmmakers probably interpret it a little bit differently to how Elton John himself interprets his life.
Well, he was heavily involved, but
he was heavily involved, and that's sort of it carries with.
I think my favourite character in that film actually was Bernie Taupin, because he understood the main character. He understood Elton John. You know, Elton's that whole bit where before he goes out on stage at the Albert Hall, and he's like, you know, you're not the one that can't walk down the street anymore. You know, and he's taking it all out on Bernie, and Bernie's just taking it, and he just turns around just before he goes out on stage and says, "I'm sorry," and Bernie just says, "I know," and it's just like he lets him, because it's almost like it's a necessity for artists that big that they have to make a massive sacrifice that most of us don't.
Yeah,
they have to basically put their whole life into it, and you know, I mean, people like him and really recognizable top celebrities.
You know, their entire life is under a microscope.
Yeah,
especially now, but in the past that would have been done by like paparazzi and the likes. And whilst it's sort of easy to say, oh well, poor them with all the millions they've got, it is a different kind of struggle that they do have, and it is important to still realise, you know, they still have difficulties to go through.
I would say, I mean, like, I think a lot of people assume that because they're rich and successful, that it's easy, that, you know, that they've got everything that they ever wanted, and it's like, if you stop to think about it, how can you possibly think that it's not incredibly difficult to live that life?
Yeah, I think it's just sort of a case of, you know, don't really downplay people's struggles, because
definitely
you might not ever really truly understand them. But it's sort of at that point, it's, you know, that's something that they've got to figure out for themselves. There's nothing that you could do to someone of that stature other than say, and maybe don't be so nosy and don't judge them so much, because You've never
And
been in their shoes.
I think, we're all in the same boat with this. However many people know us, however successful or normal, as it were, that we are, we're kind of, our life as other people see it, the part of us that they witness, we're kind of creating a work of art in the image that we project to the different people that we meet, and none of it is the full story. In fact, I was going to say the only people that actually get to see the full story are yourselves, but I only see my story from my perspective, and there'll be other people that see parts of my story that I'm not aware of because I might hide them from myself, or I might just not have the insights that they have. And that's the same thing with works of art, isn't it? People bring themselves to the witnessing experience.
I know it sounds sort of pretentious and cliche, but never, always be true to yourself. Never lie to yourself about who you are, because it'll never help you. And whilst it does cause me some difficulties, I've had this policy for a few years that where possible, I will be as honest as possible. It has hurt me in a couple of cases because I've had to actually be truthful about some stuff that I've done that most people wouldn't like to hear about if they actually ask about it.
You got to cultivate a certain amount of, if you don't like it, tough shit kind of attitude.
Yeah, well, it's sort of...
Without being deliberately offensive to people, just kind of... Although some people being deliberately offensive is their art.
It's sort of... by justifying what I've done to them, there is a sort of catharsis in that, but it's sort of, instead of just saying, it's none of your business, I like to sort of try and help them understand, but it also sort of reinforces what I might have not understood about my own experiences before by having to actually explain it. But anyway, You seem to have a fairly...
Big dick. Sorry, carry on.
You seem to have a fairly liberal consideration as to what art can be considered.
I didn't voice it. I was going to save it for the very end of the podcast, I think, as a summing up of what I think art is. And actually... this is something that actually the first time I read that preface to the Oscar Wilde story there, I was at that time quite heavily religious. And although I don't take the same thing from it now, it does reflect how I think of art. Is the artist, that first sentence, the artist is the creator of beautiful things. And I believe, actually, I'm going to have a look at this, but... just a second. No, it's not. But I was going to say I believe it's a capital C. But when you're religious, the creator is God. So that would make the universe his work of art, if you like. And I use his in the patriarchal sense. I don't agree with it.
Well, religion is generally patriarchal.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I think anything... I see everything as being potentially art, whether intentional or not. I think you can, while there is that certain amount of, it's the intention of the creator. I think through living your life, you have the ability to extract art from everything. If you choose to.
I think the word that you're looking for here, and perhaps art should become more synonymous with this, is experience.
Ooh.
You can extract experience from everything. And particularly with things that are considered art, they are an experience.
Which means...
But only if you let with me, because I find that I'm genuinely disinterested in a lot of sort of classical... What's classically described as art is usually sort of handmade stuff like drawings and paintings. But I find that, and I think this might be because I've had quite a few quite shitty art teachers, to be honest. One that I've finished with on quite bad footing, but that's a story for another time.
It does make art an interactive experience.
This is what I was going to get on to. A lot of people have, and I think a lot of people have this attitude of, oh, what are you talking about? This is art, this isn't. They see it as very binary, and you'd probably not be surprised that they probably see a lot of things as quite binary. But particularly...
something either is or isn't something.
In a subjective world, it isn't.
Yeah, though. Yeah. I mean, you could apply this to anything, like going to look at works of art in an art gallery or whatever. But I suppose the easiest thing to relate it to is something like going to see a film or listening to a piece of music. Seriously, the entirety of what can be considered art in that experience is different every time. You can go see the same film this week that you went to see last week and have a completely different experience emotionally.
Yeah,
because the situation's completely different. So that is a different work of art.
Particularly with music, the thing that they play with is
you are part of the art.
Expectation.
Mm.
The thing with 4 minutes 33 and with a blank white canvas is that's not what you're expecting when you're told this is a work of art.
But that's always going to be, and I think this is the same. This is one of the reasons why I find it really difficult listening to people expecting something to be shit.
Yeah, well,
because it's like, well, you are tainting the possibility of it not being, and the fact that if you think of going to experience any work of art as being a half and half thing, and it's not really even half and half. You are pretty much the whole experience yourself. You're taking in.
I try to give most things sort of benefit of the doubt, I guess.
I suppose you might call it positivity. But it's an oversimplification.
I feel like a lot of people are quite cynical about that sort of thing, but I feel like it's sort of, what are you actually going to get out of it if you're coming into a piece of art with the expectation of this is going to be shit? Like, what's the point of even going if you think it's going to be shit?
Mm.
But that's the thing of sort of saying, well, wait until I behold it, I suppose, because it might be beautiful.
Being open-minded.
Yeah, and there is a certain amount, because you don't have infinite time to view all art, where you have to discern sort of what's worth going to see. I was going to mention video games are sometimes considered a work of art, but this is a sort of subject of slight controversy, because a lot of people...
They fucking are.
A lot of people have this sort of...
You can't say that a movie's not a work of art. You can't say that a movie is a work of art and then not say a computer game is, especially not nowadays.
I think a lot of people have this sort of... they want to protect the idea of art. They want to keep it as...
I've got a different perspective from some people, because as a musician...
It's something quite special, and video games feel really quite accessible, so I feel like there's this sort of, I guess, elitist
It's still
attitude.
special, though. I mean, to me, because I think as a musician, there is a certain amount of awareness. You've kind of got to have a certain amount of awareness of the technical side, the physics behind what you're doing. So it is as much a science as an art.
But I think with like video games, I think the thing is,
you might be working with binary code and programming, but you're still making visual and auditory stimuli.
With more traditional forms of art, you sort of have to have some understanding of the craft beforehand to appreciate it fully. So, like, someone who's not very musically aware, whilst they can say, oh, this sounds nice to a symphony, someone who knows how to play a musical instrument or knows about musical history will find will get a lot more experience out of that. Because it'll sort of be them knowing how to interpret it a lot better.
Do you think there's any relationship between the word art and the word fart?
No. So I think.
What if you can fart a tune?
Shut up. Please shut up. With video games being considered art, and I think quite a few video games classify as art, but it's sort of where the distinction is defined by people. So I think the thing is that there's a few games that I would definitely consider art, and a few that I would just be sort of like, depending on the person, these could be considered art, but I'm not going to be too angry if someone's like, well, this isn't really art, is it?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah.
There's
you've got to be
series of games by a company called Team Ico, of which it's a trilogy, of which I've played 2 of the games. One of the games is named after the team, just called Ico, which I've read about because the games are quite minimalist, so there's a lot left up to interpretation by the beholders. So you
Where have I heard that? Eye of the Beholder. Is that a song?
It's quite a common phrase. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Do carry on. If you can remember where you were.
I have played the second game, Shadow of Colossus, and the third game, The Last Guardian. Well, they're quite prestigious titles.
How long ago was Shadow of the Colossus out?
Shadow of Colossus came out on PS2, I believe.
Really?
Maybe like 2004.
I mean, you're talking about works of art. I sincerely think of things like that Life is Strange that we played. That's art to me.
Right.
But also The Last of Us, that's definitely art. Uncharted, a lot of that is art. It's kind of, I mean, where do you draw the line? Do you think of something like Bejeweled? Or
it came out in 2005, Shadow of Colossus.
Yeah.
So let me just briefly explain the premise. The premise is you come to this forbidden land. You stole like this sword that leads you to find these Colossus.
I already know that's art.
You have your I believe girlfriend, your lover is dead. You bring them to this altar and convene with this disembodied voice to try and revive them.
So you've got fantasy, you've got a love story.
Yeah. You have to hunt down 16 Colossus, in which you have to find a way in which to kill these. And quite an interesting part of it is that these Colossi do nothing to provoke you. So you are killing sort of innocent creatures when you do this.
Yeah.
In this forbidden land, in order to save someone that you love. And that sort of toys with your feelings, because there's a sort of second storyline which I think is continued across the games, that when you kill, and this is a slight spoiler, when you kill a Colossus, these sort of shadow tentacles come out of them and embed themselves within you, and over the game you become sort of tattered and darkened by these things.
There is this. This is inherent in a lot of TV series, films, whatever, and books. Is that the idea of killing someone changing you forever? And I can imagine that being. I can't imagine. I mean, obviously, everything you do has an effect on you, but something specific like that, actually taking a life, must have a drastic effect on you.
I would really recommend you play the games of these I've got. I mean, it's a gaming experience itself, because there's just a scale to it. And
what's this? This that you're talking about now?
Yeah, playing the actual game, especially seeing the first Colossus, it just sort of stomps down a valley.
Yeah.
And this is something, especially at the time, that you would never see in a game before.
Right.
This sort of scale of, holy shit, this is actually walking.
Yeah.
This is a walking building, basically, and I have to climb it and stab it to death.
Yeah.
What the fuck? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Incidentally, just looking at this, it's got the Wikipedia page here, and it says the composer is Kawatani. This is like Shadow of Colossus has one of the best soundtracks I've ever
really
heard.
wanted to play these now. Oh fuck! The camera just died. Okay, podcast people, you have us all to yourselves.
Our dear listeners.
Yeah, so I'm going to whisper at the YouTube people. Anyway,
you do very bad whispering.
Couple of musical things that I would like to bring up, which are definitely works of art, but are kind of that you might not. Have you heard of a guy called Charles Ives?
I have, but only through actually a game.
Through what?
Through a game.
All right.
In my Civilization 5 series, one of the great works I got was Variations on America by Charles Ives.
I'm not sure if that's the piece because I don't know his work, but I do know that he's written a piece of music where basically there's two brass bands
right,
that are on opposite sides of the stage, and the music is written so that it sounds from the audience's perspective as though like you've got two brass bands coming together. They're playing two separate pieces of music. One is playing one piece on the right and one is playing another piece on the left. But the idea is that gradually the brass bands are two brass bands that are marching towards each other. And then they cross over and go in opposing directions. So, like at the start, the one on the right is playing one piece of music and the one on the left is playing another. And gradually they swap places.
Right.
Which is But the other one is Malcolm Arnold. Have you heard of him?
No.
He has a piece, I don't know what it's called, I'm sorry, but that has parts for tuned vacuum cleaners and also for transistor radios tuned to a particular frequency, which of necessity obviously means that every performance that is made is going to be different.
Right.
Because whatever's being received by the radio at the given time is going to be different. So that's
a form of music that involves instruments that change sound when the direction of the wind changes.
Yeah.
Can't remember what it's called. Anyway,
yeah.
If you wouldn't mind it.
Carry on, sorry.
On the Ico trilogy, I believe it's called.
Are you making me want to play these games now?
You really should, though.
Right, I'm going to get a chance because you're going to be away for a week and a half. I've got work to do, but
they are awesome, but they're also like an artistic experience, as you actually consider them.
And you've got all of them, have you?
I've got two of them.
The first?
I've got Shadow of Colossus, which is second made, although there's argument as to what order they happen chronologically, because
right.
the architecture in each game suggests that they happen in the same universe.
I'd like to say I'm going to play these. I'd like to say I'm going to play through the rest of The Last of Us, and I've got all sorts. I'd like to have plenty of time to play computer games. I just don't because I'm a big boy.
That's the thing about like interpreting art. I think there's a bit of snobbery when it comes, especially to games. They're sort of seen as a children's thing, but
I think it's less nowadays.
Yeah, definitely. But I think it's just sort of. There's also a bit of a barrier when it comes to games. Is when you're listening to music, you're not told. Oh, you're not skilled enough to listen to this music, so you can't finish it.
Right.
That's the thing with interactive media, especially computer games, is...
At least most of them give you an easy option, though.
These don't.
Nor does Bloodborne.
No. But that's sort of their point. With like particularly like purposefully difficult games, which Bloodborne is, but also there's another.
You could apply that to music as well. I mean, you could if you compare, say, progressive rock to standard pop music. It is a lot harder to actually. You have to work at listening to it.
I guess, but there's. It's more sort of. If that's not your thing, it's more sort of you don't.
But it can be your thing if you work at it. Yeah. It's not just a question of taste. I mean, computer games can be a question of taste in that you might not be keen on playing the kind of games that take a lot of work. But you might also know that playing through some of those games, you get a lot more reward for that.
That is the experience, I suppose, of games. It's sort of the learning.
In essence, art really is as much about how much effort you put into the experience as an observer.
But it's sort of, I think this particularly with Kingdom Come Deliverance, which I did a video on. You sort of actually, and it does this really well, the combat's actually pretty complicated. Like, you have to basically go on a journey where you actually, like, basically, if you don't go and practice the sword play...
Did I do this one with you?
No, it's single player.
What we did? Oh no, I'm thinking of the one with the Thomas the Tank Engine
Skyrim
mod. Yeah.
You have to actually learn swordplay basically, and you actually learn some pretty complex techniques.
How does that fit into the art form, kind of like having mods and stuff, and things like Little Big Planet? I would say that's definitely art.
I guess that's sort of
it's kind of contributory art.
The video game equivalent of arrangements. You
bring your own. You invite your audience to create.
With Little Big Planet levels, that's slightly different because it's sort of creating a tool more. But with mods, that's more a sort of adding your own little twist. So it might be the equivalent of making a jazz version of Stairway to Heaven.
So it's like cover versions. A mod is like a cover version.
Sometimes they actually do vastly improve them. Like, there's someone that's been working on a Skyrim mod for years that actually opens up the rest of the continent in the Elder Scrolls world.
Yeah.
But using the same engine.
I feel like we should be winding up soon. But you look quite anxious about that because I'm not letting you finish your point.
Yeah, the Ico trilogy.
You're still going
I really like it.
Obviously.
It's most what I consider... Alright, I want to explain the premise of The Last Guardian, which is the other game I've played.
Go on.
I believe is the third game in the trilogy. But they might make...
You know I'm going to say something annoying, though.
The original creator is dead.
Well swept under the carpet.
What?
Carry on.
Right, the premise is you are in a cave with this sort of beast of legend.
Oh, not again.
You play as a sort of young boy, and you wake up and there's this sort of massive beast. With,
not again.
Well, there's sort of a lot of fear around it, and as it generates, you sort of learn, there's actually quite a lot of stigma around this creature. People are scared of this, it's a monster. But you sort of help it initially. And I think that sort of conveys the sort of innocence of a child. And you do learn things later that make it, on a second play, probably a lot more disturbing. But
this sounds like life.
Won't spoil it. You help it initially, which means that it starts helping you, and a lot of the experience is sort of...
And then later on you realise that you maybe shouldn't have.
Well, it's the only way that you can actually get out, by helping it, and it helps you as well. You sort of improve your relationship to the point where you can actually issue it commands. And this is sort of combining your intellect with its... the fact that it can, jump, because it's
I don't know why, but popped into my head just then was Big Hero 6.
Yeah, I guess it's it starts with a bit of an aggressive attitude to you, but it sort of portrays, because it is quite a realistic creature, and it feels like it's actually sort of your pet, and it's quite a dynamic way in which the bond between the character and the creature, but also between how you understand how the creature thinks and what it's afraid of. And the story behind how you ended up there evolves at the same time, and it's sort of trying to capture that, and I think that's what makes that art.
I'm going to try to make a promise to have a a bit of a play. What's the first one called? Is the first one the one you haven't got?
The first one's called Ico.
And you haven't got that?
Which, yeah, there's a funny story about that, which is apparently...
Is it funny?
It's sort of funny. On the game's cover...
Is it kind of geek funny?
It looks like the boy that you play as has an erection. And throughout the game, your character can't run, and it's speculated that the reason is because they have an erection the whole time.
Yeah, that's geek funny.
It's weird.
I have to apologise because I mean you're clearly very
passionate
about this game, and I feel that I've reached that can number, which means I'm probably unable to hold deep, meaningful conversations for much longer.
Okay.
I'm a bit pissed, in other words.
I see.
Which, I mean, I think we're probably nearly at time anyway, aren't we? And we've got American Pie Reunion to watch.
Mm-hmm.
But is there anything else you want to say? Because I don't want to kind of just cut you off. I'm not into that sort of thing.
Oh, no. I would guess just sort of say... I mean, this is sort of reiterating slightly what I said in the reality podcast about my meaning of life. Whilst it might not be yours, I would definitely take it on, because it is basically that idea of enlightenment, I think.
One thing I want to really desperately say, and
Right.
this is something that I've always had a problem with, is I don't like it when people arbitrarily say that something is shit, or it looks shit, or it's crap, it's rubbish,
without really giving a proper justification.
Please, just for my sanity, my sake, my peace of mind, just say I don't like the look of it, or in my opinion, or make it your. It's like, because it's an insult. If I like something and you're in my face saying it's shit,
I think
you're basically telling me my opinion doesn't matter.
Generally, and I guess this does tie into what we were going on about.
I try not to say, if somebody's telling me something's shit and I'm saying to them it's really good, I try not to do that. I like to say to them, I liked it, or I enjoyed it, or I thought it was good.
Yeah.
Not,
I would say
it's really good, because that's like saying your opinion is
in general. Well, that's what I was saying. I mean, I think a lot of people have this attitude towards metal music where they say, "Oh, it's just noise. It's just screaming and shouting. It's just sort of." But whilst it may be a bit of a challenge to listen to someone that's not so used to it, if you actually listen to some of the more intricate complications, especially with something like symphonic metal, because that's just special to me. Like, I've achieved a level of appreciation that they never would from listening.
The kind of art that you get the most out of is the stuff that you have to put the most effort into yourself. And I find, I mean, like, one of my favourite classical composers, classical in the widest sense of the word, is Mahler. He's a romantic composer, and his symphonies take a lot of effort. You know, some of them are an hour and a half long. But they're worth it. It's like a journey that you have to take. And this is why I like albums as opposed to these, like, just sort of individual songs that people tend to listen to and shuffle play stuff nowadays. I like an album because it's a journey. There
are some that do this more explicitly than others, where they do try to tell you a specific story within the album.
But it's like, you know, sometimes if you listen to just the last track of an album, it's like turning to the last chapter of a book and reading that. Without the rest of it, it means a lot less,
I guess.
And sometimes it takes a lot of investment. There's too much sort of instant gratification required nowadays.
Yeah. Don't. I just farted.
I did fart, and that instantly gratified me. Oh no, it didn't. I didn't mean that. That's not what I meant.
Okay. Right.
We should leave, shouldn't we?
I want to. You were
interrupting.
Well, you were making your own point, and I was trying to sum it up. Generally, in a lot of things, and this does tie into what we were going on about earlier, is use language how it's supposed to be more specific, because saying, oh, it's just shit is...
If somebody says to me something is shit, I immediately disregard the rest of their opinion about it, because it's like, well, no, you're saying something untrue. You're giving an opinion as fact.
Right. It's sort of, they're saying it very definitively. And I think I do this a lot in my mannerisms as well. It might come off as being a bit nervous, I guess. I'll use a lot of qualifiers like I'd assume or I think, rather than saying...
It doesn't take much to insert that into your
with things that there is a possibility of being sure with.
Do you know what I think doesn't help though?
But I'm not confident in it.
I think Twitter is really guilty of, like, because of that kind of, you've got to be concise. People are much more likely to say, this looks crap, or this is going to be crap, rather than, I don't think this is going to be very good. Or, it takes more to actually qualify something as an opinion rather than a statement.
Mm. But I think the point of that is to cut down on the barriers. It is to maximise the instant gratification, but it sort of cuts down on the barriers to...
But it does encourage polarisation.
Yeah. It's trying to cut down on the waffle, but...
It does sensationalise.
Yeah.
Which is the way the world is kind of trying to go, I suppose. I just don't like it. I would rather people were more respectful of each other's opinions.
Yeah, I guess. But
having said that, I did have someone come along on my on one of the groups I'm on Facebook saying that they didn't often disagree with my opinion on films and stuff, but they have to say that Rocket Man's not their favourite. I had a long conversation with them and someone else about it, and basically ended up telling them that they're wrong. But it was done in a tongue-in-cheek way,
Right.
It wasn't kind of. I wasn't.
Well, it
was just like sort of. It was a fun thing.
Another important point in art, and this is why I quite like to mention, is context.
Yeah, definitely.
Because in different contexts,
that's a good song.
Art entirely changes. Basically, the entire. Actually, you know what? Go listen to Kant.
Yeah.
The song by Tim Minchin, and you'll understand. I don't want to spoil the twist.
No, but it is. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a fairly obvious kind of. But actually, there's another song which illustrates not just what you've just said about context, but also the title of the song itself. Prejudice.
Oh, yes.
Is another example of a contextual assumption in practice. Anyway, I'm running out of sense.
That's unusual. So I would just say so. I mean, we have waffled on a lot, but I feel like a lot of people
We're preaching the word.
Don't really have the time to consider art a lot. They just sort of experience it and go, okay,
I'll tell you what,
that was nice, that was pretty.
You'd fucking notice if it wasn't there. I challenge anyone to spend a day even without, not just listening to, but without hearing any music. See how you feel at the end of that day.
I mean, it is sort of, to live in a world devoid of art is sort of, it's sensory deprivation, because art is...
Well, it started on
just
the
what you
walls of
interpret
caves,
with,
didn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
I suppose at that point it was more of a historical record. And is that not what we're doing? We're making... Let's see, if I write a song now, what we're doing now is capturing history, aren't we? We're writing on our cave wall right now.
I guess, yeah. I mean, it'll change based... But that's the thing. Back then...
There'll be digital archaeologists come along and unearth our podcast.
Yeah, going back then, we're sort of, when we look at cave art, some of that might be for their own enjoyment, but some of it might be messages to say, oh, there's bison in this area or whatever.
Yeah, but basically they're immortalizing something.
Yeah. I don't know how immortal data will be because the information era,
That's one of the things.
digitalism hasn't really been around.
No,
as long.
that's one of the things that's kind of it's actually a lot more temporary nowadays. If you think, you had the things on the cave walls, that's like tens of thousands of years that lasts.
Yeah,
and more recently, you look
thing-
at how long stuff lasts on paper, but like there's already stuff that we can't read on floppy disks because the equipment's just not there.
the thing is, with
only a
something
couple
like
of
that,
decades
there
old,
had to be the right conditions, and the people that made that art probably didn't know how long it would be preserved for.
Permanence. I think that's one of the things we're coming to terms with now in the digital
It's
ages.
the sort of thing now.
Archiving, isn't it? There are archivists.
I noticed it when we went.
Stunning again.
We went on a day trip to Rhodes. We didn't actually have time to go see what the ruins were, but we do have records that suggest this, but we can't actually see it now. Is the Colossus of Rhodes? I think all we have now are sort of the feet because it's eroded over so many years.
Eroded. Roads eroded.
Huh.
Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh my god! It all ties together.
Fart.
It's the circle of life.
Oh my god.
Did you just have an epiphany?
No, I wasn't hungry.
What?
I have no idea. We should stop because I'm creating some modern art. I feel like we should. Do you know what we should do? We should do a Banksy with this podcast. As soon as we should set it up so that when people download it, the first half shreds.
No.
We should start the podcast halfway through.
No.
It would be modern art.
No, that would make no sense.
Well, all right, then we'll subject them to the whole shitload of shite. Then let's finish it because we've got to do some outtakes afterwards.
Right.
So the official part of the podcast, we're about to.
No.
What are you doing?
I don't know. You really derail my train of thought. Or right.
Fucking hell, we're going back about half an hour now.
No.
You're still talking about Shadow Ico.
No. I've been through this. Go and experience.
Deja vu.
Just try and experience art from a place of innocence, at least the first time.
Oh yeah.
Because
fresh eyes.
This is why I don't really like spoilers so much.
Empty your mind.
It sort of taints that first experience.
Yeah.
And that
enjoy your first experience of something as well, because you're never ever gonna. That is one thing you're only ever gonna get to do once in your entire life. Some things you can repeat, but one thing you can never repeat is a first time. It's like losing your virginity.
I knew you were going to say that.
That's what she said.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, I think we should probably end the podcast before we tail off.
I think it's too late for that.
Anyway.
Go on, say anyway again, go on.
Anything else to say?
Foreskin.
A very insightful, artistic comment.
Dick cheese.
Shut up. Let's just end the podcast before
I'm being artistic.
No, you're not.
In your opinion. You've got to bring your
off.
Innocence. Open eyes.
Fuck off.
You're so close-minded.
What
the fuck is that?
I don't
for a
know.
gurning championship.
Oh.
Let's finish.
Right, yeah.
Bye.
Shut up.
No. Do you know what? I've actually turned pissing off my teenager into an art form.
Oh no.
You're not a possession, by the way. My teenage son.
Are we ready to finish?
That's what she said.
Oh, fuck.
That's what she said.
Cause
That's what she said.
She had already finished before you knew what was going on.
Well, obviously, every time.
Oh, well, actually, that's sort of a compliment.
Exactly.
Anyway, I have been Firebolt. I want to wrap this up. I've been the Orbiter.
I've been the Orbiter.
And this has been
Great fun.
Breaking Bollocks, episode 40.
It's art.
It was.
Literally.
My thoughts on the Hegelian dialectic and gesamtkunstwerk.
Bye.
And etymology.
Bye.
And then you brought in
Bye.
fucking dick cheese like a fucking knob jockey. Fuck you.
This is just a different art form.
Fuck you. This angry art.
I'm sorry, but you cannot... Look, you're the kind of person that would tell Gemma Jameson that she's not an artist.
What? Who's Jenna Jameson? Who's Gemma Jameson? Oh, are they a porn star? No, please don't actually show me.
I don't know if I'm right.
I'm looking away. I am looking at this wall. I don't want to see.
I don't know if I'm right. Did I get her name right?
I am not looking at this. I'm not looking at this.
Yeah.
Not with my dad.
No, look, there's nothing there. It's a Wikipedia page.
I don't care. I don't trust you.
There's nothing that, like, honestly, there's nothing there. She's
Yeah, pornographic. Hardly fucking surprising.
What? So what was it I said?
You were the type of person that wouldn't call Jenna Jameson an artist.
Yeah, because you were saying that I brought up dick cheese, and that's not art. So, like, essentially, what's his name? Roy Chubby Brown's not an artist, then.
Look, it's
It's not to your taste. It's not your kind of art form.
Yeah, I'm a gay porn man myself.
I'm sure there must be a Jamie Jennison or something.
No, just shut up.
Shall we finish now?
Right. Yeah, I was finishing.
What's going on here?
I was finishing, but then you
We
went
have finished.
off on... Okay, we have. Yeah, we said I've been fine.
We did, yeah.
So this
It's
is just all
10 to
going
1 in the
after
morning.
outro. Shit.
We better stop because the neighbours will complain.
The windows are still open.
Yeah, well, they're cunts anyway. They ride motorbikes at 11:30 at night with really loud... Well, they did last night.
One of them did.
Oh, yeah, not all of them. But they all heard it. Can I stop now?
Yeah, probably.
This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast Network.